This whole thing started with Mike James. He's a vice president with Sunt Construction out in Phoenix. I was casting about for a leadership book, and he mentioned Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal. And in reading that, Stanley McChrystal said a book that was having a major impact on his life at that time was a book called Seize the Fire by Adam Nicholson. And so I bought Seize the Fire and was enthralled as I was learning about Horatio Nelson. And so it came to be a few weeks ago, I was speaking to Jody Cook Redwood, the associate publisher at LBM Journal, and I was talking to her about this new article I was writing about Horatio Nelson. And I laughed and I said, I know, no one's ever even heard of this guy. And she said, oh no, I know him well. He's hanging on my wall in my basement. And I said to her, how did that happen?
So I was born and raised in south central England, in the county of Oxfordshire, which is like right dead center England. And I grew up in a little village there, and it's a very nice area, went to good schools and all the rest of it. But somewhere in my early 20s, I kind of got the wanderlust, if you will, and realized there's a big world out there.
This is Paul Redwood, Jody Cook Redwood's husband. In addition to having an amazing last name, he is the Director of Strategic Procurement at Accent Building Materials. And if I had to travel around the world, I'd want to do it with a guy like Paul. He's funny, smart, he writes his own symphonies because, well, of course he does. He knows a bunch of random stuff, and he certainly knows how to tell a good story.
I decided I'm out. I'm like 24 at this point. I rented out my house, put a backpack on, and off I went. Traveled around the Mediterranean for a while, spent about almost a year in Israel on a kibbutz, volunteering on a kibbutz. Met a woman there who I subsequently married, who is from the Chicago area. Hence, I emigrated in 86. And my start was in sales, selling pneumatic nailing and stapling equipment. And, I'm still doing that, amongst other things. I'm actually more buying it now than selling it. But yes, absolutely. I'm still doing it.
So, Paul, you have a painting of Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson in your basement.
Correct.
Why?
I was on my way to Italy to spend time with family in Italy. And on the way, we went to Portsmouth. And that's where the Victory is now, his ship on which he was killed. So I toured that in Portsmouth and, fell in love with the whole story and so on and so forth then. And then many years later, Jody and I were in England and we went down to Portsmouth and saw it. And there's the picture. I'm like, gotta have it. I gotta have that picture. So, now it's in the basement. Yeah. Love that guy.
Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartmann. In today's episode, you'll learn about the leadership traits of the greatest sea commander who ever lived, Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. But before we get to him and how his life matters to yours today, we need to understand the size and scale of the vehicles of death that once populated the Royal British Navy in 1805 that made it the most effective maritime killing machine in the world. That's right, Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, the little, undefeated, one-armed, one-eyed leader who did as much to thwart the domination of Napoleon as the Battle of Waterloo, well, he can wait a minute while we talk about his ships. I want you to imagine you're sitting in the highest seats of an NFL stadium. You're all the way at the top. You look over your left shoulder and you see across the acres of parking lots. Now you swivel your head back toward the stadium and you look down at the field and you see you're right at the 50-yard line. And in the middle of the field, you see the HMS Victory, Horatio Nelson's heavyweight ship of the line. The stern, it rests at the goal line to your left, while the bow extends all the way to your right, across the 50-yard line, and it continues into the opponent's red zone. its bowsprit, the long horizontal pole at the front of the bow, breaking the plane of the 10-yard line. There are 3 huge oak masts, the tallest of which soars another 50 feet above your head, even as you sit in the nosebleediest seats in the stadium. The masts, they connect 37 individual sails made of thick canvas cloth that drapes over 6,000 square yards. Untethered from the yardarms and spread out on the turf, these sails cover the entirety of the football field. Of the 850 sailors on board, 250 are focused on sail management and rigging operations. A literal marathon of rope is on deck, more than 26 miles of it, to manhandle the whole thing. Now, the hull of the ship is clad with 40,000 pounds of copper and held in place with 5,000 pounds of nails. It's a floating Goliath, handcrafted from nearly 4,000 individual trees that had occupied nearly 100 acres of land. Each and every one of the 104 cannons on board each weigh over a ton, and the largest, they weigh over 3 tons. And the 32-pound cannonballs they fire kill sailors merely by passing by them. That's right, the pressure of the shockwave from a cannonball, one that in 1805 could be fired more than a mile through the air, can kill a man simply by missing him by 10 feet. This is the half-floating hotel and half-supersized tank that Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson navigated into the Battle of Trafalgar. Outmanned and outgunned against a fleet composed of the best French and Spanish commanders. This was the fight Nelson wanted, the one that England needed. Napoleon was at the height of his reign, and his plan was simple: destroy the Royal Navy, proceed with an English land invasion, and then rule the entire world. Now, standing at just 5'4", Horatio Nelson was 2 inches shorter than Napoleon. And yet, neither his miniature stature nor his obvious wounds diminished the man. Nelson had lost his right arm in battle, amputated on the deck of the very same HMS Victory with a butcher's blade. 2 years later, Nelson was blinded in his right eye when lumber fragments from a cannon strike pierced his iris.
But when I've got you in the corner of my eye.
What do you admire most about Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson as a leader, as a person, anything?
He embodies many of the things that I really admire. The guy had immense courage. I mean, his job at the end of the day was to stand on the most dangerous part of the ship, stand still and get shot at. That was his job. As an example to his people, don't be afraid. Look, I'm here. I know who the boss is. They can all have a go at me. So it took immense courage to do that. And he was innovative. He won 3 very famous victories through innovation. He didn't fight in the typical way of, line ship fighting in that way, especially at Trafalgar, where he came into the enemy in a perpendicular way instead of alongside. Very innovative fighter. And also what I admired about him was that he would be inventive to further his ends. So, for example, at one of his famous victories at Copenhagen, he was signaled by the superior to leave the battle. And his subordinate said, look, they're telling us to leave. And he put his telescope up to his blind eye and said, I don't see anything. He was a very small man of stature, but yeah, he got his arm blown off, he got his eye blown out, and he was still like, it's a flesh wound that come back and fight.
These injuries only magnified his legendary status. In an era of the quote-unquote line of battle tactic, the vast majority of naval engagements resulted in a stalemate. This tactic aligned each side's fleet into a single file lined up stern to bow. The 2 sides, now in a pair of long parallel lines, then volleyed cannon shots at one another until one fleet ran out of ammunition and sailed off. Nelson was done with the line of battle tactic. I consider the destruction of the enemy's fleet of so much consequence, Nelson wrote months before Trafalgar, and yes, that is exactly what he sounded like. and I'm hoping you get just a little bit more value from my dramatic reading. Although this will absolutely, surely, 100% insult the guest on this episode, the actual Brit, Mr. Paul Redwood. That I would willingly have half of mine burnt to effect their destruction. I am in a fever. God send I may find them. On the morning of October 21st, 1805, he did. Between the Franco-Spanish fleet of 33 ships and Nelson's 27, there were more than 47,000 sailors in the water off the coast of southern Spain. Instead of arranging his boats in parallel, Nelson gave his captains two sets of instructions. First, the English fleet would form two columns running perpendicular to the Franco-Spanish line of battle and sail directly into them. The tip of the spear would be Nelson's HMS Victory, which would be hammered by the full force of the Franco-Spanish cannonade. More than 2,800 cannons would be aimed directly at Nelson. With no cannons at the front of his ship, the Victory would have to weather an unrelenting, violent storm of fire and lead until it rammed headlong into its enemies. Second, Nelson told his captains to expect no communication or instructions from him once the smoke and dying engulfed the Bay of Cadiz. He trusted his men, he told them, to act as entrepreneurs of battle. No captain can do very wrong, he said, if he places his ship alongside that of the enemy.
We're just going to blast the heck out of this thing from 20 feet.
Yeah. As you hear that line, what really speaks to you that maybe we haven't talked about, or if we're just kind of, is this another way to kind of say the same thing that's already been said?
I think it goes a little bit further. In sales, we've all read that thing that's on the sales manager's wall. How many times does it take to call them? Like, so many salespeople only call twice. But on average, it takes 9 contacts to get anywhere. So stay with it. Keep going after it. Get in there amongst them. Do the hard work. Because at the end of the day, sales is hard work. If a successful salesperson works very hard, and if you're shy of hard work, you're not going to make it. And I think if you want to transfer that line to the sales world, what it means is it's all very well making a plan, but at some point, someone's got to get off their rear and do something.
5 hours after the battle began, the combined French and Spanish fleet was obliterated. 22 ships lost and 6,500 men killed. The British, remarkably, lost no ships and 650 souls, a staggering 10-to-1 advantage in the death toll. But the greatest loss was their leader. Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, undefeated in battle, was shot in the shoulder by a sniper. He bled to death on the deck of his Victory as he sipped lemonade and whispered his final words, "God be praised, I have done my duty." Nearly 220 years later, wars, tariffs, and economic uncertainty have replaced the French and Spanish as the dominant enemy of the reigning world power. And today, from sea to shining sea, most leaders up and down the organization, faced with this unpredictable foe, have responded with caution. Their strategy? Just maintain the status quo. Don't rock the boat. Just hold the line with existing customers, weather the storm, and let's hope to fight another day. In this choice, it feels right. After all, the future is inherently unpredictable, and few among us are confident in forecasting economic policy and its consequences in the lives of our customers. Like Horatio Nelson before us, however, now is not the time for timidity. As leaders, we must heed the words of the greatest sea commander in history. No captain can do very wrong if he places his ship alongside that of the enemy. As the admiral of your fleet, you must direct your captains, those you lead, be it from above or below within the chain of command, to navigate alongside the enemy, to get closer, and engage with the topics most frightening to your best customers. Here's how. Recently, we've been helping an LBM dealer in the Northeast go on offense and attack. And we've been talking about builders, residential, commercial, civil, whatever. Builders are predictable in their fundamental needs. When they ask, well, how will this affect me? They're asking about pricing and availability. The eternal needs of builders start with two questions. How much does it cost? And when can I get it? And your success, the success of my client, to date has been built on availability. Buying, storing, packaging, and delivering building materials. So I told him, you can keep doing what you're doing. Yet as things change, arguably the most powerful weapon in your artillery is your story. It's your expertise, it's your perspective, and it's your plan to move ahead, to attack, while you're controlling what you can control. And the problem is most organizations right now, they don't have a consistent story. They're waiting. They're hoping for things to become clearer. And while I won't say waiting is never the right tactic, hoping sure as heck isn't. So you got to develop your own story, and the story must come from the top. You can't expect individual employees to craft their own narratives around wars and tariffs and economic uncertainty. That message must come from the top. It must be clear, concise, and coached by you. Then the story must be rehearsed by them, every single person on your team. One of the vice presidents at this firm told me, too many of our salespeople just wing it. They let their mouths cook up some greasy stories on the fly, but builders can smell that BS from a mile away. And he said there's a direct correlation between home starts and a builder's tolerance for vague sales ramblings. When home starts decline, so does a builder's patience for unclear, improvised messaging from their sales rep. As a former builder myself, I couldn't agree more. And while it's understandable for sales reps and everyone else on our team that we might slip into self-interest, understandable? Sure. Acceptable? No. Your best customers don't really care about you, especially now. They care about themselves, their people, their projects, their schedules, their cash flow, their bottom line, their customers. Now, as you go on offense and you tack this head on like Horatio Nelson, your story must feature if-then scenarios. Your story, and anyone on your team delivering it, must communicate a paradox. While no one really knows what's going to happen, you and your team have been thoughtful in planning for various eventualities. Builders want to hear you've thought through likely scenarios. They want to understand your thought process. If A happens, we'll do B. If C, then D. And if E happens, well, we'll go with F. The underlying message throughout is that you're thinking through possible eventualities with their best interests at heart. And the best way to do this is to make sure your story is multimedia. Adults learn through 4 mediums: video, audio, reading and writing, and kinesthetic learning, which is a fancy term for doing. So your story, updated and coached as often as this overwhelming uncertainty lasts, should be distributed in as many formats as your team can execute consistently. Record a quick Loom video and extract the audio as a private podcast. Use it in your online newsletter and arm your sales reps and business development managers with printed copies to share in person to make the story all the more engaging and relevant, be it sales or ops, internal or external. To what degree is the idea of Nelson and his history and what he stands for relevant today?
I think it's relevant in the sense that he literally embodies leading from the front. In other words, I'm going to make the plan, I'm going to lay the plan out, but I'm going to be right there with you in the most dangerous spot there can be as you're carrying out my plan. Once the battle plan is in order, my job is just to stand here and get shot at. You've got to do the work at that point. So when you think about sales, I mean, there's a lot of sales executives out there, sales managers and all the rest of it that never leave the office. They don't want to get their hands wet. They don't dirty. They don't want to go out and show the young kids how to close the sale, how to build rapport with people, how to generate relationships that are enduring. They want to sit in the office and they want to criticize and read reports and so on and so forth. Whereas, Nelson was the absolute opposite of that. He was right in the thick of things, not only making the plans, but carrying out the plans and setting the best possible example that he could for the guys. And it was very clear that the technical mastery to enable you to be able to maneuver your ship so that you had advantage over the enemy was astonishing. And he embodied that. He had absolute technical mastery of how to sail ships in general, which had to give a lot of comfort to the sailors and the other ships under his command that, we're being led here by a guy that not only has the fighting spirit, but he has all the technical skills and know how to get us through this thing. I think Nelson embodies that 100%.
For nearly 2 centuries before Horatio Nelson and his fleet formed 2 perpendicular columns and speared the Franco-Spanish fleet on October 21st, 1805, naval warfare followed a predictable playbook, the line of battle. The unspoken agreement was simple. You stay over there and we'll stay over here. Let's just keep things civil. There's already plenty of death and disease on all of our boats, thanks for nothing, scurvy. So let's not make things worse by actually, killing each other. This type of implicit gentleman's agreement to avoid hand-to-hand combat matches the competitive nature of many of the firms we consult with in local markets. When discussing competition with clients, what I hear most often is some version of, well, Bradley, they have their loyal customers and, we have ours. We don't poach theirs and they don't poach ours. And you and Horatio Nelson in this regard face a similar fundamental question. How do you choose to compete? How aggressive do you want to be? How do you define victory and how much does it mean to you? Do you have a fever for persistent differential returns? That is, earning higher profits and increasing market share in any market condition? Or are you content to not rock the boat, to simply go with the flow, to be average? Because that is the definition of average. Like everyone else, you sell more when the market rises and you sell less when the market sinks. You grow when the market goes up and you shrink when the market goes down. Your leadership is crucial here. Your leadership will enable the development of your own entrepreneurs of battle. Creative, adaptable individuals operating on a team of teams who aren't afraid to stand on the front of the ship, facing the incoming fire with the courage to try new things, whether it's artificial intelligence or learn new applications or tactics from other industries. You want to lead professionals who leverage technology to understand their business better and identify opportunities faster. And then you want to lead professionals who attack. If Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson was a sales leader today in the LBM industry, how do you think he would act? Would he embrace the CRM? How would he think about LinkedIn? What comes to mind if you had to transplant him today and be amongst us and kind of be a modern leader?
I think he'd be like, okay, if you've got your own way of counting the cannons or whatever, like you do it your way. As long as you get the job done, I don't really care how you get the job done. He's like, what's your body of work? Did you sell it or didn't you? Did you make the number or didn't you? How you did it? What do I care? So CRM maybe not so much, but LinkedIn, I think he'd love that.
Well, guys don't become a Lord Admiral by just being great at what they do. You got to find a way to play the politics and knowing people and know how power works and how power changes hands and all that stuff.
Very early on in his career, he was offered a lucrative role patrolling the North Atlantic. It was the kind of role where you could go up through the ranks, you could get that kind of recognition. But he wanted to go to the Caribbean. He went to the Caribbean because the Caribbean was where the fighting was. And the fighting is where you capture other ships and you capture treasure. If you can capture their ships and bring them back to England, you get treasure for that. I mean, being on a nice big ship's one thing, but he wanted to go where the action and the glory was. He had a little bit of a hero worship about himself, and he really wanted to put himself on a pedestal, but be worthy of being on that pedestal. He wanted to be like, I'm the man. I know I'm the man. I want everybody to know I'm the man because look what I did. So yeah. I think him opting for the Caribbean at that time, which was not only a dangerous place to be from the point of view of combat, but from the point of view of disease. Many famous British naval officers, commanders, Hawkins come to mind, Drake comes to mind, died of disease in the Caribbean. They had great military careers, but it was a dangerous place to be. But he wanted to be there because that's where the action was.
And while technology like artificial intelligence is available to you now, technology alone doesn't win battles. Like Nelson, you need to be where the action is. And it's probably not behind your desk. It'll be out there on the projects where the work is getting done. Author Adam Nicholson, in his book, Seize the Fire, articulates this well. Technology does not distinguish the fleets, or at least not sufficiently. What makes them different are the people on board. Trafalgar is a meeting of men. It is in the men that the difference lies between aggression and the need to defend, between the desire to attack and destroy and the desperate fear for one's life, between the ability to persist in battle when surrounded by gore, grief, and destruction, and the need to submit to the natural instincts to surrender, and between the reliance on an old-fashioned tactical method of defense, the well-closed-up line, and a hungry, searching, and disconcerting inventiveness which blew that defense into atoms. And while your trucks might not be as large as the HMS Victory, consuming much of the space in an NFL stadium, you've got your own fleet. But it's not the machines that change the world. It's the leaders directing them into battle. Leaders like Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, who embodied that hunger to win with its disconcerting inventiveness, his willingness to try new ideas. And at this point in time, with the wars and the tariffs and the economic uncertainty, we need new ideas now. We need you. Thanks for listening, and best of luck in the second half of 2025 as you go about achieving your own victory. And we'll close this episode with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.